The bullet that killed Marcus took 3.7 seconds to arrive. James Holden watched it coming through his scope, watched the way the air shimmered around the trajectory, watched the way his partner and best friend of 9 years turned his head at exactly the wrong moment. Watch the way Marcus Sullivan's skull came apart in a spray of red mist and bone fragments that painted the Mogadishu dust. October 1993, Somalia. The mission that officially never happened in the war, America pretended it wasn't fighting. James had the shot, had it for almost 4 seconds. 4 seconds was an eternity in sniper work. 4 seconds was enough time to end the warlord who'd orchestrated the ambush that killed 18 Rangers 3 days prior. 4 seconds was enough time to complete the mission and get Marcus medical attention. But you couldn't do both. Mission or man. The choice every operator faced eventually. The choice that defined who you were when everything else stripped away. James took the shot, eliminated the target. Textbook kill at 70 meters. The kind of shot they'd study in training schools if anyone ever admitted the mission existed. By the time he reached Marcus Sullivan, his spotter was already gone. Eyes open, blood pooling, radio still crackling with extraction coordinates that didn't matter anymore. Marcus had been 42, 20 years in the service. Wife named Helen, 3-year-old son named Daniel. The man who'd trained James Holden to be the deadliest sniper in CIA Special Activities Division history. Dead because James chose mission over man. That was 31 years ago. James still saw it every single night. The ceiling fan in his quarters made the same sound it always made. Rhythmic thumping, slightly off balance. The kind of maintenance issue that drove normal people crazy, but that James barely noticed anymore after 4 years of listening to it. He checked the clock without moving his head. 05:23. 7 minutes before his alarm. 7 minutes before he had to stop being the man who killed Marcus Sullivan and start being Commander James Holden of Sentinel Security Group's Arizona facility. 7 minutes to remember he was 62 years old and that the body kept score even when you tried to forget the game. His knee throbbed. The one he destroyed in Panama in 1987 during an operation that remained classified 37 years later. His shoulder ached. The one that never healed right after the Chinook went down in Afghanistan in 2001. 3 cracked ribs from Chechnya in 1999. Scar tissue in his lungs from the chemical exposure in Iraq in 2003. 30 years of making the world safer for people who'd never know his name. 30 years of killing men who needed killing in places that didn't officially exist. 30 years of choosing mission over everything else. The price was in his bones, in his joints, in the nightmares that came every single night without exception. He sat up slowly. Every movement calculated, every motion designed to minimize pain. This was being 62. This was what happened to warriors who survived long enough to become old men. His quarters looked like they belonged to someone passing through. Spartan. Military corners on the bed. Bathroom clean enough for inspection. Nothing personal except 3 items that James couldn't quite abandon. On the wall, 1 photograph. Nicaragua, 1988. James and Marcus and 3 other operators whose names were still classified. All of them young. All of them convinced they were making the world better. All of them wrong about the cost. On the desk, 1 letter, unopened. Postmarked 3 weeks ago. Return address showed Emily Holden in Denver. His daughter, 40 years old now. He'd missed her high school graduation, her college graduation, her wedding, the birth of his grandson Lucas, who was 13 now, and who James had never met. He stared at the letter like he did every morning, thought about opening it, thought about reading whatever Emily wanted to say to the father who'd chosen his country over his family for 4 decades. But some doors stayed closed for a reason. In the closet, hidden behind uniforms and tactical gear, a gun safe bolted to the concrete floor. Inside that safe, an M14 rifle, modified, accurized, fitted with a leatherwood scope. Military designation M21, built in 1968, the same year James was born. Issued to him in 1984 when the CIA recruited him out of Army Special Forces, when they taught him that some problems couldn't be solved with diplomacy or conventional forces. Some problems required a man with a rifle and the willingness to use it in places that didn't appear on any map. 312 confirmed kills with that rifle. 312 human beings who'd gone to sleep their last night alive, not knowing James Holden existed. 312 names he could still recite in alphabetical order if anyone asked. No one ever asked. He hadn't fired that rifle in combat in 11 years. Not since his official retirement from the agency in 2013. Not since they gave him a pension and a medal he couldn't show anyone, and a promise that his service record would stay classified for 50 years after his death. James touched the safe but didn't open it. Some tools were better left in the dark. The Arizona desert at dawn had a quality that reminded James of a dozen other deserts in a dozen other countries where he'd eliminated targets for reasons that seemed important at the time. The sun came up fast, brutal, turning the landscape into something that could kill you if you weren't careful. Sentinel Security Group's Arizona facility sat 23 miles outside Yuma, 4 acres of reinforced concrete and chain-link fence, 12-foot walls topped with razor wire, guard towers at each corner manned 24 hours, surveillance cameras every 15 meters feeding into a central monitoring station. The kind of place that looked like a prison from outside but functioned as a fortress from within. Private military contractors. That was the polite term. Mercenaries was the honest one. Men who'd learned to fight for their country and then discovered their country didn't quite know what to do with them when the fighting stopped. So they came to places like this, drew paychecks, pretended they were still serving something larger than corporate profit margins. Sentinel employed 22 security personnel at the Arizona facility. Most of them were solid. Former Rangers, Marines, Special Forces, good men who'd done their time and were trying to figure out what came after. James walked the morning perimeter out of habit, checking, always checking, looking for the anomalies, the patterns that didn't fit, the signs someone was doing reconnaissance or probing defenses or planning something. 40 years of staying alive had taught him paranoia wasn't mental illness. It was professional competence. Commander Holden, David Pierce, compound manager, 51 years old, former Army quartermaster who discovered he had a gift for logistics and absolutely no gift for getting shot at. Smart man, competent. The kind of administrator who kept facilities running while operators pretended they were still at war. Morning, Pierce, situation report. Quiet night, no incidents. Perimeter sensors green across the board. Tower watch reports negative contact. David paused, shifted his weight, body language that meant he was about to say something his commander wouldn't want to hear. James, we need to talk about something. They walked to David's office. Small space, 3 monitors showing security camera feeds. On one screen, James could see the morning shift change, guards rotating positions, fresh personnel relieving the night crew. Standard, routine, boring. Everything James had spent 30 years not being. What's on your mind, David? You need to retire, for real this time. James waited, old interrogation technique, let the silence stretch. People couldn't stand silence. They'd fill it with truth. David filled it. You're 62 years old. You wake up every morning from nightmares you think nobody notices. You run this place like we're still in a war zone instead of providing corporate security in Arizona. And you've been staring at that letter from Emily for 3 weeks without opening it. Didn't realize you were monitoring my personal correspondence. I'm not monitoring anything. I'm watching my friend destroy himself. You've been out here 4 years, James. 4 years since Robert Grant convinced you to take this assignment. 4 years of pretending you're not slowly dying from whatever's eating you from inside. James looked at the monitors, watched the young operators moving through their routines. Men in their 20s and 30s, still believing their training mattered. Still believing they were warriors instead of armed security guards protecting corporate assets. This job is my retirement, David. I don't know how to do anything else. That's what terrifies me. You've been an operator for so long, you've forgotten you're allowed to be human. Before James could respond, the radio on David's desk crackled. Operations, this is a main gate, inbound convoy, 3 vehicles, requesting confirmation on visitor manifest. David grabbed the radio. Main gate, operations, confirm vehicle types and passenger count. 3 armored Suburbans. Manifest shows Victoria Chen, CEO TechCore Industries, plus executive security detail and staff. They're on the schedule per this morning's briefing. James frowned. What briefing? David pulled up a document on his monitor. Grant sent this through yesterday. Didn't you read it? Robert Grant, Regional Director for Sentinel Security Group, 68 years old. James's handler at the CIA for 20 years before they both transitioned to private sector work. The man who'd recruited James into Special Activities Division in 1984. The man who knew every classified operation James had ever run. The man who also knew exactly how to manipulate James Holden into doing things he'd rather avoid. I skimmed it. High-value client. Standard security evaluation. Didn't seem urgent. It's a $600 million contract negotiation, James. Victoria Chen is evaluating Sentinel for Worldwide Executive Protection Services. Grant specifically requested this facility, specifically requested you run the evaluation. Why? Because your reputation apparently exists even in circles where your service record is classified. The radio crackled again. Operations, convoy at secondary checkpoint, request clearance to proceed. David keyed the mic. Convoy cleared, direct them to VIP parking. I'll meet them at admin. After David left, James sat alone in operations. On the monitors, he watched the convoy enter the compound. 3 black Suburbans, armored, run-flat tires, tinted windows, the kind of vehicles that screamed high-value target to anyone with training. The lead vehicle's doors opened. Security detail emerged first. 4 operators in civilian clothes that didn't quite hide the body armor. Professional spacing, good awareness, quality work. Then Victoria Chen stepped out, late 50s. James had read her file the night before when he couldn't sleep. Stanford MBA, built tech core industries from nothing to Fortune 500 in 18 years. Brilliant strategist, ruthless negotiator. The kind of woman who'd climbed to the top of an industry that didn't welcome women and had done it by being better than everyone else. But Victoria Chen wasn't what made James lean forward toward the monitor. It was the man beside her, personal bodyguard, late 50s, moving with the economy of someone who'd been in real combat, someone who'd survived things that killed other people, someone James recognized, Thomas Sullivan. Tom, Marcus Sullivan's younger brother, the man who'd blamed James Holden for his brother's death for 31 years. James's hands started shaking, just slightly, just enough that he had to put them flat on the desk to make them stop. He hadn't seen Tom Sullivan since Marcus's funeral in 1993, Arlington National Cemetery. Full honors, folded flag, 21-gun salute, all the ceremony the military provided for men who died in operations that officially never happened. Tom had looked at James across the open grave, looked at him with eyes that held grief and rage and an accusation that didn't need words. You killed him. You chose the shot. You let my brother die. And James had stood there in his dress uniform with his medals and his commendations and his classified service record and known Tom was right. The radio on the desk crackled. David's voice. James, Victoria Chen is requesting to meet you personally. Apparently Grant told her you'd be available. James keyed the mic, his voice steady despite what he was feeling, despite 31 years of guilt suddenly sitting in his chest like a concrete block. Be there in 5. The walk to admin took 3 minutes. Long enough for James to run through every possible scenario. Long enough to prepare for seeing Tom Sullivan face to face. Long enough to remember that some wounds never healed no matter how many years passed. Victoria Chen was waiting in the conference room. Expensive business casual, designer glasses, the presence of someone who'd spent 20 years commanding boardrooms and crushing competitors. She extended her hand with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. Commander Holden, Robert Grant speaks very highly of your capabilities. Thank you for hosting us. James shook her hand, professional, controlled. Grant has a tendency to exaggerate. Welcome to the facility, Ms. Chen. Please, Victoria. She gestured to the people around her. My assistant, Rebecca Stanton. CFO, Douglas Warner. Security Director, Angela Torres. James nodded to each. Professional courtesies. But his attention was on the man standing slightly behind Victoria. The man who hadn't taken his eyes off James since he entered the room. Thomas Sullivan. Tom, 60 years old now. Still in good shape. Still carrying himself like the Marine Force recon operator he'd been before going private sector. Still looking at James Holden like he was measuring him for a grave. And this is Tom Sullivan, my head of personal security, 8 years with me, best in the business. Tom extended his hand. James took it. The handshake lasted exactly 1 second too long. Long enough for both men to communicate what words couldn't say in front of clients. I know what you did. I know who you are. This isn't over. Victoria was talking about security requirements, about threats against her company, about competitors who'd escalated from industrial espionage to actual violence, about needing protection that could operate globally. James heard maybe half of it. The rest of his attention was on Tom Sullivan, on the way he positioned himself in the room, on the tension in his shoulders, on the way his eyes never stopped cataloging threats and exits like a man who'd spent decades staying alive in hostile environments. Professional work, the kind James recognized because he'd been doing it for 40 years. The briefing lasted 30 minutes. Victoria asked questions. James provided answers. Angela took notes. Douglas looked uncomfortable in the desert heat despite air conditioning. Rebecca typed constantly on her tablet. And through it all, Tom Sullivan watched James Holden with the patience of a man who'd waited 31 years and could wait longer. After Victoria's team left, David appeared beside James. Well, think we got the contract? James was still watching Tom Sullivan through the window, watching the way he moved, the way he stayed close to Victoria but never crowded her. Professional protection work from someone who knew exactly what he was doing. David, I need Tom Sullivan's complete file, everything from the last 10 years. You know him? Used to? Long time ago. Is that going to be a problem? James thought about Marcus Sullivan bleeding out in Mogadishu. Thought about Tom's face at the funeral. Thought about 31 years of guilt that never faded. Probably. The afternoon briefing brought the security team together in operations. 22 personnel. Most were competent. A few were excellent. One was exceptional. Nathan Cross, 28 years old, former 75th Ranger Regiment, 2 combat deployments to Afghanistan. Infantry team leader, Silver Star for pulling 3 wounded soldiers out of an ambush while taking fire from elevated positions. Young, aggressive, confident to the point of arrogance. Everything James had been at 28 before the world taught him that confidence without wisdom was just stupidity wearing a uniform. Robert Grant had sent Nathan to Arizona 6 months ago, told James to evaluate him, see if he had potential for more specialized work, the kind of work that didn't appear on Sentinel contracts, the kind of work James used to do. Nathan was talented. James could see that immediately. Tactically sound, physically capable, brave to the point of recklessness. The kind of soldier who'd charge into gunfire when smarter men found cover. But he was also everything wrong with the new generation. Technology-dependent, impatient with process. Dismissive of lessons learned in wars he'd been too young to fight. The briefing covered standard protocols. Victoria Chen's visit, security posture, patrol schedules, communication procedures, all the details that kept people alive when situations deteriorated. Nathan raised his hand during James's section on observation protocols. Commander, no disrespect, but don't a lot of these procedures seem outdated? We have drones now, thermal imaging, real-time satellite coverage. Do we really need people sitting in towers with binoculars like it's 1944? Several operators smiled. Nathan had voiced what some were thinking, but were too professional to say. The old man's tactics were from another era. Time to modernize. James looked at Nathan for a long moment, saw himself at 28, saw that same certainty that technology and youth and speed could solve any problem. Tell me something, Cross. How many enemy snipers have you engaged in combat? None, sir. My deployments were mostly close quarters, urban environments. Right. So you've never dealt with a shooter who's been in position for 18 hours, who's done detailed reconnaissance, who knows your patrol patterns and shift changes and weak points, who's been watching you through a scope while you're eating and sleeping and thinking you're safe because you have technology. James pulled up a satellite image of the compound on the main screen. Observation ridge, 700 meters north, perfect elevation advantage, natural concealment, multiple firing positions with overlapping fields of fire. If someone wanted to attack this facility, that's where they'd position. He zoomed in. Your drones can be jammed with $50 equipment. Your thermal imaging can be defeated with proper camouflage and heat blankets. Your satellites have coverage gaps and can be hacked by reasonably competent state actors. But a trained sniper with a quality rifle and patience? That's the constant. That's what's killed people since gunpowder was invented. That's why we have operators in towers with binoculars, because sometimes the old ways work better than new ones. Nathan nodded, chastened but unconvinced. Understood, sir. After the briefing, James caught Nathan outside operations. Cross, walk with me. They walked the perimeter. Afternoon heat pushing 112 degrees. The kind of temperature that made thinking difficult and judgment even worse. You think I'm obsolete? Outdated tactics from outdated wars. I understand that perspective. You're not entirely wrong. Nathan looked uncomfortable. Sir, I didn't mean to imply. Yes, you did, and that's fine. Question authority. That's how you survive. But let me tell you about old tactics. James stopped, pointed at observation ridge in the distance. 1999. Grozny, Chechnya. I was part of a small team. We were observing a rebel position from a ridge similar to that one, 750 meters out. We'd been in position for 42 hours. No drones, No satellites, no thermal imaging, just rifles and optics and patience. When the assault went in, we provided overwatch. Eliminated 23 targets over 6 hours. 23 men who would have killed our allies if we hadn't been there. He turned to Nathan. You know what made that mission successful? Experience. Knowing how to read terrain, how to account for wind and temperature and mirage, how to wait for the perfect moment instead of taking the first available shot. All the old school fundamentals you think are obsolete. Nathan was listening now. Really listening. I'm not saying technology is worthless, Cross. I'm saying it's a tool, not a replacement for skill and judgment and patience. You have potential. Grant sent you here because he recognizes that. But potential without wisdom just gets you killed faster. How do I develop wisdom, sir? James smiled. It wasn't a happy expression. You survive long enough, and you hope the price isn't too high. That evening, James sat in his quarters with Tom Sullivan's file open on his laptop. David had pulled everything: employment history, financial records, known associates, combat deployments, citations, the digital footprint of a professional life. Tom had left the Marines in '95, 2 years after Marcus died, took his force recon training private, executive protection, high-risk details, worked for 4 different security firms before signing with Victoria Chen 9 years ago. Clean record throughout, no incidents, professional work. But James wasn't interested in the professional record. He was reading the personal details, the things that explained why a man carried a grudge for 3 decades. Tom had never married, no children, but he'd helped raise Marcus's son after his brother was killed, helped Marcus's widow Helen through the grief, became the father figure for his nephew when the boy's biological father was buried at Arlington. That nephew, Daniel Sullivan, named after his father, currently 34 years old, Army combat medic, 23 years of service, currently assigned to, James stopped reading, currently assigned to Sentinel Security Group, Arizona facility. Daniel Sullivan, the combat medic on James's team, former Navy corpsman, the man James had been working alongside for 3 years without knowing the connection. Marcus Sullivan's son, Tom Sullivan's nephew, working for the man who'd let his father die in Mogadishu. James closed the laptop, sat in darkness. Outside, the desert night was alive with small sounds: wind, insects, distant highway traffic. He thought about opening Emily's letter, thought about reading whatever his daughter wanted to say, thought about the grandson named Lucas, who was 13 and growing up without knowing his grandfather existed as anything more than a name. But some letters were like some doors, better left closed. His phone rang, Robert Grant's number. This wasn't coincidental, James said instead of hello. Grant's voice was the same as it had been for 40 years. Calm, measured. The voice of a man who'd mastered deception so completely, he no longer distinguished it from truth. Victoria Chen is a legitimate client with legitimate security requirements. The fact that her head of security happens to be Tom Sullivan is unfortunate timing. Bullshit. You don't do coincidence, Robert. You've been orchestrating operations since before I knew what Black Ops meant. Pause. Then Grant's voice changed. Less handler, more old friend. James, Tom Sullivan is genuinely one of the best protection specialists in the industry. Victoria specifically requested him for this evaluation. I couldn't have excluded him without raising questions I didn't want to answer. So yes, I knew he'd be there. No, I didn't warn you because I knew you'd find reasons to decline the assignment. His nephew is on my team, Marcus's son, you know that. I placed him there 3 years ago, wanted to see if he inherited his father's instincts. Turns out he did. Extraordinary medic. James felt something cold settling into his chest. The feeling he got when operations went sideways. When mission parameters changed and extraction plans evaporated. What's the play here, Robert? Why bring this all together now? Grant was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried weight. Because something's coming, James. 43 years in intelligence work. You develop instincts. Mine are screaming. Victoria Chen is in more danger than she understands. This facility is going to be tested. When that happens, I need the best operator I've ever known, ready to do what he does best. I'm retired. You're breathing. That's not the same thing. Not for men like us. After Grant disconnected, James sat in darkness thinking about the difference between retired and breathing. Thinking about choices made over 4 decades. The missions, the eliminations, the men he'd saved and the men he'd lost and the men he'd killed without ever learning their names. 312 confirmed kills, each one a human being with a life and family and dreams that ended when James Holden squeezed a trigger. He thought about opening the gun safe, about removing the M21, about remembering what it felt like to be that person. The operator, the tool the government deployed when diplomacy failed. But he didn't open the safe. Some tools belonged in darkness. At 02:15, James gave up on sleep, did push-ups until his arms burned, sit-ups until his core cramped. Physical punishment that should have exhausted him enough to rest. It never worked. By 04:30, he was dressed and heading to the supply warehouse. Might as well be productive instead of lying awake thinking about ghosts. The compound at night had different character. Quieter, shadows deeper, desert temperature dropping to something almost comfortable. Tower guards visible as silhouettes against stars. Security cameras tracking movement with electronic eyes that never blinked. James walked the perimeter from habit, checking, always checking, looking for anomalies, things that didn't fit patterns, signs someone was doing reconnaissance or probing defenses or preparing for action. 40 years of survival had taught him paranoia wasn't pathology, it was skill. At 05:41, Ryan Mitchell's voice crackled over the radio from East Tower. Operations, East Tower. Movement on Observation Ridge. Single individual, approximately 650 meters out. James was moving before Ryan finished speaking, headed for operations at a pace just short of running. 40 years of instinct, screaming this was wrong. That movement on the ridge at dawn wasn't random. That the game had changed. He reached operations as David was responding. East Tower operations, probably local Shepherd, maintain observation. Negative on Shepherd, operations. Individual is prone behind rocks. No livestock visible. This looks tactical. James took the radio from David's hand. East Tower, Commander Holden. Maintain visual contact. I'm accessing thermal imaging. On the monitor, James pulled up the feed from the tower's thermal camera. Zoomed on Observation Ridge. Single heat signature exactly where Ryan reported. Prone, stationary. Position offering perfect compound overview. Reconnaissance. James keyed compound-wide frequency. All personnel, Commander Holden. Potential hostile observation on Observation Ridge. Battle stations. This is not a drill. David was staring. James, it could be. It's not. Get Nathan and Cross and his team armed. Perimeter patrols now. For 20 minutes, the compound transformed. Security personnel moving to positions. Arms transitioning from ready status. Defense machinery engaging. At 06:07, Ryan's voice came through again. Different tone, no longer reporting. Warning. Operations, East Tower. Multiple contacts on Observation Ridge. Count is 7, 8 individuals. All prone positions. Repeat, 8 individuals in tactical positions across ridgeline. Ranges 420 to 790 meters. The operations center went silent. 8 individuals, professional spacing, overlapping fields of fire, perfect tactical positioning, not reconnaissance. Attack preparation. James's hands were steady as he keyed the radio. Steady despite adrenaline. Steady because he'd done this in a dozen countries and the routine bypassed conscious thought. All security personnel, Commander Holden. Hostile contact confirmed. 8 shooters in sniper positions on Observation Ridge. Assume hostile intent. Battle stations. I repeat, this is not a drill. Nathan Cross's voice came through. Young, urgent, but controlled. Commander, recommend moving Victoria Chen to hardened room. Approved. Tom Sullivan's team will assist. Execute now. Through operations windows, James watched the compound respond. Personnel sprinting to positions. Arms being checked. The choreography of men who'd trained for this, hoping it would never happen. But James's attention was on the monitor, on Observation Ridge, on 8 heat signatures arranged with professional precision, on the reality that someone had done reconnaissance, had learned vulnerabilities, had positioned for maximum effectiveness, someone who knew their business. David was talking, asking questions, requesting orders, but James was somewhere else, 36 years in the past, standing on a ridge in Nicaragua, learning to be a sniper from Marcus Sullivan. Patience, James. A sniper's greatest asset isn't the rifle, it's time. You observe, you learn, you understand everything about your target. Then when conditions are perfect, you act. One shot, one kill. That's the contract we make. At 06:19, the first shot cracked across the desert. The sound was distinct, even at distance. High-powered rifle. The sound meaning someone just died. Through the operations window, James saw David Pierce's head snap back, saw him drop, saw the blood. The second shot followed immediately. Nathan Cross, center mass, body armor that should have stopped 7.62 NATO. But something was wrong. The round had more energy, larger caliber, .338 Lapua Magnum maybe, the kind of ammunition designed to defeat body armor. Nathan went down hard, not moving, but James could see his chest, still rising and falling, shallow breaths. The armor had caught most of it. Cracked ribs, maybe collapsed lung. Critical but survivable if they got him medical attention fast. Then Observation Ridge erupted and the compound became a slaughter zone. James grabbed the radio, grabbed David, checked for pulse knowing he wouldn't find one. Throat shot, massive trauma, dead before impact. More shots, more casualties. Kevin Palmer, 23 years old, newest team member. Caught exposed, multiple hits, down and not moving. Brian Davis, 34, wife and 2 daughters. Center mass wound. The kind James had seen enough times to know it was fatal. 8 rifles firing from elevated positions. Professional precision. Coordinated fields of fire. The kind of attack from special operations units. From people who'd been doing this for years. Not terrorists, not random violence. Professional military contractors executing a planned operation. And James Holden, standing in operations while his people died, knew exactly what he had to do. The thing he'd sworn he'd never do again. The thing he'd spent 11 years trying to forget. He looked toward his quarters, toward the gun safe, toward the M21 rifle with 312 confirmed kills. Then he looked at Nathan Cross lying in the compound yard. Wounded, dying, reminding him of Marcus Sullivan in Mogadishu, reminding him of the choice between mission and men. James keyed the radio, found Daniel Sullivan's frequency, the combat medic, Marcus Sullivan's son. Sullivan, Commander Holden, listen carefully. Daniel's voice came back stressed but professional. Commander, we're pinned down, multiple casualties. I can't reach the wounded. I know, I can stop this. But I need 30 seconds of suppressive fire on the ridge. Sir, what are you? James interrupted. Voice carrying 40 years of authority. Authority from a man who'd made impossible choices in impossible situations. I'm former CIA Special Activities Division. Ground branch. 30 years operational. 312 confirmed eliminations. I can neutralize these shooters, but I need covering fire now. Silence. 2 seconds feeling like forever. Then Daniel Sullivan's voice. Different now. Understanding something. All elements, Sullivan. Suppressive fire on Observation Ridge on my mark. Maximum rate. Don't aim. Just get rounds downrange. Commander Holden is moving. James was already moving, out of operations, across the compound yard. Rounds impacting around him, but his mind was elsewhere. Calculating. Planning. Becoming the thing he tried to leave behind. He reached his quarters, grabbed gun safe keys, hands steady despite chaos outside, despite sounds of dying men and automatic fire and all the noise of combat he'd learned to filter decades ago. The M21 came out of the safe like it had been waiting, like it knew this moment would arrive. 56 years old, built 1968, issued to James Holden 1980. 312 confirmed kills. James grabbed the chest rig with loaded magazines, grabbed the range card he'd made of Observation Ridge 3 years ago when he took command, the card showing every firing position, every angle, every dead space. The card he'd made because paranoia was an illness. It was survival skill. Outside, Daniel Sullivan was coordinating covering fire. All elements, suppressive fire in 3, 2, 1, execute. 5 rifles opened up, pouring rounds toward the ridge, not aimed, just noise and bullets to make enemy snipers duck, to break rhythm, to buy time. James moved to admin building, to rooftop access, to observation platform where maintenance crews service HVAC units, to the position offering line of sight on Observation Ridge with elevation advantage. He climbed stairs, 62 years old, every step reminding him of age, every breath labored, but his hands were steady, his mind was clear. When he reached the rooftop and settled into prone position behind the low wall, something shifted. The shaking stopped, the doubt evaporated. James Holden looked through the scope of his M21 rifle and became the thing he'd tried to forget. He became an operator. Through the scope, Observation Ridge jumped into perfect focus. Details suddenly visible. Rock formations, individual bushes, terrain features creating concealment. And the shooters, 8 of them, professional positioning, quality equipment, Russian optics, Dragunov SVDs, Orsis T-5000s. Arms meaning serious money and serious training. But they'd made one mistake. They'd assumed the compound was defended by regular contractors, by men with basic training and standard equipment, by people who'd fight competently but without the edge separating survivors from casualties. They'd assumed wrong. James found his first target, range 675 meters, prone behind granite outcropping, muzzle barely visible, maybe 6 inches of shoulder exposure through foliage gap. Not much, but enough. James settled behind the rifle, controlled breathing, let heart rate slow despite adrenaline. This was the moment between, when training and instinct merged, when time slowed, when the world narrowed to what you saw through a scope. His finger found the trigger. Smooth press. Perfect release. The M21 barked. 56 years old and functionally perfect. Through the scope, James watched the first enemy sniper jerk and fall, tumbling from position, revealing himself fully as he died. 1 down, 7 to go. And James Holden, who'd spent 11 years trying to be something other than a killer, finally accepted truth. This was who he was. This was what he did. And right now, that was exactly what these people needed. The second target died without ever knowing James Holden existed. Range 520 meters, concealed in brush. Thinking the foliage made him invisible. Thinking distance and camouflage equaled safety. He was wrong. James's finger pressed the trigger. The M21 barked. The target dropped. 2 down, 6 to go. Through his scope, James watched the remaining shooters react. Watched them realize someone was returning fire with precision they hadn't anticipated. Watched professional discipline start to crack. They'd come expecting to slaughter untrained security contractors. They'd found something else entirely. Target 3 had repositioned after watching his companions fall. Smart tactical decision. Standard counter-sniper protocol. Move immediately after teammates are eliminated. Don't stay in the position the enemy has already identified. But James had been doing this since before most of these shooters were born. He tracked their muzzle flashes during the initial engagement, built a mental map of their positions, understood their overlapping fields of fire. When someone moved, they revealed patterns, tendencies, tactical preferences that became predictable once you knew how to read them. James scanned the ridge line methodically, not rushing, letting his eyes adjust to magnification and heat distortion already building as the sun climbed higher, looking for the anomaly, the thing that didn't belong in the natural landscape. There, range 580 meters, tucked into a depression between 2 large boulders. The shooter had moved from his original position at 520, sliding backward and left, trying to break line of sight. Good fieldcraft. But he'd made one critical error. His new position forced him to expose more of his silhouette to maintain visual contact with the compound. James could see his head and upper torso through a gap in the rocks. Not ideal. James preferred center mass shots when possible, but he'd take what the terrain offered. The angle was tricky, shooting slightly downward now that the target had repositioned to lower ground. James adjusted his point of aim, compensating for ballistic arc. Accounting for the 4-mile-per-hour crosswind, he could see moving brush at the ridge line. His breathing cycled, in, out. Natural pause at the bottom of the exhale. The rifle settled into the pocket of his shoulder like it belonged there. Like the 11 years away had never happened. James pressed the trigger. The 190-grain Sierra Match King bullet left the barrel at 2,850 feet per second, crossing the distance in roughly 0.7 of a second. Through his scope, James watched the impact. Saw the figure drop instantly. No movement afterward. 3 down, 5 to go. Below him, on the compound grounds, he could hear voices on the radio. Daniel Sullivan coordinating with other operators. Both of them trying to understand what was happening. Watching their quiet compound commander execute professional counter-sniper operations with precision they'd never seen outside specialized training courses. Target 4 was harder to find. He'd gone completely still after the 3rd elimination. Understanding that movement meant death. James appreciated the discipline even as he hunted him. This one had real training, not just marksmanship, but fieldcraft, patience, the mental fortitude to control panic when your team was being systematically destroyed around you. James scanned each potential hide site with surgical precision, looking for anomalies that betrayed human presence, straight lines in nature's curves, shadows falling at wrong angles, subtle geometric shapes of man-made equipment against organic terrain. His scope swept across rock faces and scrub brush, between boulders and into depressions, searching for the one detail that didn't belong. Minutes passed. Below him, the compound remained eerily quiet. Everyone holding positions, wounded men being dragged to cover by teammates. Daniel Sullivan's voice giving medical instructions, his corpsman training taking over as he triaged casualties. David Pierce was dead. James knew that from the wound he'd seen. Nathan Cross was critical. The armor had saved his life, but the .338 Lapua round had cracked ribs, maybe collapsed a lung. The others he couldn't be certain about without visual confirmation. He pushed away the tactical assessment of friendly casualties, channeled attention back to the hunt. The fourth shooter was out there, hidden, waiting for James to make a mistake, to expose himself, to give him a target. It became a contest of patience and skill. Two professionals locked in deadly observation and concealment. Then James saw it, not the shooter himself, his scope, the tiniest glint of glass catching sunlight, maybe half an inch of objective lens visible through camouflage. 720 meters out at the northern edge of the ridge. He'd moved far from his original position, probably been moving since James took the first shot, relocating to extreme range where he thought he'd be safe. James calculated the shot in his head. Wind had picked up, now gusting to 6 miles per hour from the west. Temperature climbing, probably 85 degrees, humidity dropping. Range was pushing his comfort zone in these conditions, but well within the M21's capabilities. The scope glint told him position, gave him a reference point. He knew standard prone shooting positions, understood body mechanics, could visualize where the shooter's head and torso had to be based on that scope angle. James adjusted his aim point, compensating for all the variables, trusting calculations he'd made thousands of times across hundreds of shots. The crosshair settled on a spot 6 inches below and 2 inches left of the scope glint, where center mass should be if his mental picture was accurate. The trigger press was smooth, almost gentle. The rifle recoiled, cycling the bolt automatically, chambering a fresh round. 720 meters away, the fourth shooter jerked violently, his scope tumbling from concealment as his body convulsed. Through magnification, James saw him roll partially into view, confirming the hit, confirming he was no longer a threat. 4 down, 4 to go. The remaining shooters broke discipline. James watched 2 of them move simultaneously, abandoning their positions, scrambling backward toward the reverse slope of the ridge where they'd have cover from his angle of fire. Panic overriding training, survival instinct trumping tactical doctrine. They'd watched 4 teammates die in rapid succession from an enemy they couldn't locate, couldn't suppress, couldn't escape. Fear made them run. James tracked the first runner, male, approximately 175 pounds based on movement pattern, carrying a rifle and wearing light body armor. He was sprinting now, no longer concerned with stealth, just trying to put distance and terrain between himself and whoever was killing his team. Range 615 meters and increasing. James led him by 3 feet, compensating for speed and direction. His finger found the trigger for the 5th time that morning. The runner went down hard, momentum carrying him forward in an uncontrolled tumble down the rocky slope. His rifle clattered away, bouncing between stones. He didn't get up. 5 down, 3 to go. The second runner had made better decisions. Instead of running straight back, he'd moved laterally along the ridge, using terrain features for cover, breaking line of sight every few seconds as he ducked behind rocks and into gullies. More experienced, harder to track, but not impossible. James waited, scoping his likely path, predicting where he'd emerge from the dead space he was currently using. Patience was the sniper's greatest asset, more valuable than marksmanship, more deadly than the rifle itself. Rushing the shot meant missing. Missing meant he'd escape, meant the threat would continue. There, emerging from behind a boulder cluster at 680 meters, moving fast but not quite running, trying to balance speed with tactical awareness. James had his crosshairs on the spot before the man appeared, already compensated for wind and distance. When the runner entered his field of view, James was ready. The 6th shot of the engagement punched him sideways, spinning him completely around before gravity took over. He dropped into the rocks and didn't move. 6 down, 2 to go. The remaining 2 snipers had vanished. No movement, no visible positions, nothing indicating where they'd gone or whether they were still in the fight. James continued scanning, methodical, patient, understanding that wounded animals were often most dangerous. These last two had watched their entire team die. They knew they were overmatched, outclassed, facing someone with capabilities they couldn't counter. That made them unpredictable. His radio crackled. Sarah Knox from East Tower. Commander, I've got thermal imaging on the ridge now that it's warmer, picking up one heat signature, approximately 450 meters from compound, dug in behind rock formation. He's not moving, just lying there. Could be wounded or could be waiting. Give me coordinates, James requested, adjusting position slightly to get better angle. Bearing 285 degrees from East Tower, range 447 meters. He's in a natural depression, mostly concealed, but thermal's picking him up clear. James swung his scope to the indicated position. Range 450 meters, almost due west from his current location, which put the sun at his back. Advantage his. But he still couldn't see the target visually. The depression Sarah mentioned was deep enough to provide complete cover from ground-level observation. Can you see his armament? James asked. Negative, but he's in prone position consistent with shooting stance, definitely armed. James considered options. He could wait him out. Let psychological pressure build until the shooter either surrendered or tried to escape. He could coordinate with the security team to approach his position with overwhelming force, or he could take the shot based on Sarah's thermal imaging, firing at a target he couldn't visually confirm. None of those options appealed. Waiting gave the shooter time to plan, potentially time for reinforcements if this was part of a larger operation. Sending the security team to assault his position risked more casualties. Firing blind violated every principle of precision shooting he'd been taught. Sarah, I need you to mark his position with tracer fire. Don't try to hit him. Just put rounds near his position, close enough that I can see impacts. Copy. Stand by. 5 seconds later, Sarah's M4 opened up from East Tower, firing short controlled bursts toward the depression. James watched through his scope as tracer rounds arced across the distance, impacting rocks and dirt near the thermal signature. The impacts gave him the reference he needed, showed him exactly where to aim. The last shooter made his decision. He broke from cover, rifle up, swinging toward the compound. He'd chosen desperate action over paralysis, decided to take as many enemies with him as possible before he died. Brave, stupid, but tactically predictable. James's crosshairs were already on him before he'd fully emerged. Range 448 meters, target moving laterally to his position, moderate wind, clear sight picture. This was the easiest shot of the engagement, almost routine after the technical challenges of previous eliminations. James fired. The last enemy sniper dropped his rifle before he fell, hands going to his chest in the universal gesture of someone who'd just taken a fatal hit. He collapsed forward, rolling onto his side, then lay still. 8 down, 0 to go. James remained in position for another 3 minutes, scanning the entire ridgeline, confirming no additional threats, ensuring the engagement was truly over. Only when he was absolutely certain did he key his radio. All security personnel, Commander Holden, 8 hostile snipers confirmed eliminated. Observation ridge is clear. You can move wounded to medical station. The compound erupted with activity. Security operators emerging from cover, arms still ready, sweeping for any threats James might have missed. Daniel Sullivan coordinating casualty evacuation, directing movement of stretchers toward the medical station. Nathan Cross stood in the open, one hand pressed to his chest where the armor had saved his life, staring up at the rooftop platform where James's position was now obvious, his expression mixing disbelief with something approaching awe. James safed the rifle, stood slowly, his joints protesting the extended prone position. Morning sun higher now, temperature climbing toward the day's peak, making the concrete roof radiate heat. He slung the M21 over his shoulder and made his way back down through the administrative building. The compound was different now, permanently changed by violence. Bullet impacts scarred concrete walls, blood-stained ground where David Pierce and Kevin Palmer had died. The cheerful routine of yesterday was gone, replaced by harsh reality that in places like this, security wasn't a service you provided. It was a fight you won or lost. And losing meant death. James emerged from the building into organized chaos. Security operators everywhere, some helping wounded teammates, others maintaining defensive positions, a few just standing still, processing what had happened. He walked toward the medical station, knowing Daniel Sullivan would need help. knowing his obligations didn't end just because the shooting had stopped. Tom Sullivan intercepted him halfway there. Marcus's brother looked different than he had 3 hours ago. His professional bodyguard demeanor completely shattered by combat he'd never expected to see at what was supposed to be a routine client evaluation. James, Tom's voice was rough. Victoria's secure in the hardened room. We got her there before the shooting started. She's demanding to know what's happening. Tell her the threat is neutralized. She can remain there until we're certain no follow-up attack is coming. Tom studied him, really looked at him for the first time since arriving, seeing something he hadn't noticed before. 8 professional snipers. You eliminated all of them in 20 minutes with a rifle that's older than most of the operators on this compound. Tom paused. Who the hell are you really, James? You know who I am. You've known for 31 years. I knew you were CIA. I knew you were the man who let Marcus die. But I didn't know. Tom struggled for words. That shooting, that was beyond anything I've seen in 25 years of protection work. That was world-class precision under combat conditions. James didn't respond, just continued toward medical. Tom followed. I blamed you for Marcus's death. Spent 3 decades hating you for choosing the mission over my brother. But watching you today, watching you save everyone in this compound, I'm starting to understand why Marcus respected you so much. Don't, James said quietly. Don't try to make peace with what I did. Marcus died because I took a shot instead of protecting him. That's the truth. Today doesn't change it. Maybe not, but today proves you're still the operator Marcus trained you to be. He'd be proud of that, even if you killed him earning it. They reached the medical station where Daniel Sullivan had transformed the small clinic into a combat surgical suite. Nathan Cross lay on the primary treatment table, chest tube inserted, pressure bandages covering the impact site where the .338 Lapua round had hit his armor. The round hadn't penetrated completely, but the kinetic energy transfer had been devastating. 3 cracked ribs, collapsed left lung, massive bruising across his entire torso. If the armor had been 1 generation older, or if the round had hit 6 inches to the right, Nathan would be dead. His face was gray, breathing labored through the chest tube, but his eyes were open and aware. Diane Morris, the 43-year-old compound nurse, worked alongside Daniel with the efficiency of someone who'd treated trauma before, though probably never anything like this. Marcus Flynn occupied a second table, his hip immobilized, morphine keeping him sedated. Derek Wallace sat on a chair, his leg wound bandaged, color better now that bleeding was controlled. Daniel looked up as James entered, his blood-covered hands never stopping their work on Nathan's chest. Commander, I need you to help Diane with Marcus's vitals. I'm busy keeping Nathan alive. 3 months minimum recovery, maybe 6 before he's operational again. The armor saved his life, but the impact trauma was severe. James moved to Marcus's side, checking pulse, blood pressure, oxygen saturation. The numbers were stable, within acceptable ranges for his injury. He relayed them to Daniel, who nodded without looking up from Nathan's chest. You saved us, Marcus Flynn said. His voice slurred from morphine but coherent enough. I saw you on that rooftop. Saw the muzzle flashes. Counted them, 8 shots, 8 kills. I've been in this business 7 years and I've never seen shooting like that. Save your strength, James told him. You're going to need it for recovery. Who are you, really? Derek Wallace asked from his chair, his leg elevated, watching James with intense curiosity. Because you're not just a compound commander. Nobody shoots like that without serious training. Before James could answer, Nathan Cross spoke from the treatment table, his voice weak but determined. Pain medication couldn't quite suppress his need to understand. He's what we all pretend to be, a real operator. Not security contractors playing soldier, the actual thing. James looked at Nathan, saw the young man who'd questioned his methods that morning, who'd dismissed old-school tactics as obsolete, who'd just learned humility the hardest way possible. Rest, Cross, you've got a long recovery ahead. 3 months minimum before you're cleared for light duty. 6 before you're operational. Use that time to think about patience and old lessons. I'm sorry I doubted you, old man. I'm sorry I thought speed was more important than patience. You weren't wrong to question. That's how you learn. But today you learned why some old lessons don't age. Robert Grant's helicopter touched down 30 minutes later. The regional director emerged with a medical evacuation team. Professional trauma specialists who took over from Daniel with equipment and training that exceeded what the compound clinic could provide. They had Nathan loaded on a stretcher in under 3 minutes. IV running, monitors attached, pressure bandages reinforced. He was wheels up 5 minutes after that, heading to a military hospital where surgeons could address internal injuries Daniel couldn't treat in the field. Marcus Flynn went next, his sedation adjusted for transport, the medical team confident he'd survive, but warning of a 6-month recovery minimum for the hip damage. Grant waited until the helicopters lifted off before approaching James. "You went completely operational," Grant observed. "Not quite an accusation, not quite approval, something between. I did what was necessary." 8 confirmed eliminations. Perfect shooting. No friendly fire. No civilian casualties. That's the kind of performance that gets written up in classified after-action reports. I don't want reports. I want to know who attacked us and why. Grant pulled out a tablet, showed James intelligence that had been developing while he was on the rooftop. The attackers were Apex Strategic Solutions, Russian-backed private military company, based in Eastern Europe with operations throughout Middle East and Africa. They specialize in direct action missions that conventional forces can't or won't conduct. James studied the file, recognized the company name. They'd been gaining reputation in PMC circles for high-risk work, the kind of contracts that required serious operators with serious skills. Someone hired them to hit this facility, to kill Victoria Chen, to eliminate anyone protecting her, including you. Why? Grant showed him another document. This one recovered from encrypted communications on phones taken from the dead shooters. Corporate assassination. Victoria Chen was evaluating Sentinel for a $600 million protection contract. One of her competitors decided to eliminate her before she could sign, make it look like our security was inadequate, destroy Sentinel's reputation in the process. James scanned the document, saw references to reconnaissance conducted over the past week, to security postures analyzed, to weak points identified, to his own capabilities assessed. There was a photo of him, pulled from some database, attached to a threat assessment that made his stomach tighten. James Holden, former CIA Special Activities Division, Ground Branch, 30 years operational, 312 confirmed eliminations. Current assignment, Sentinel Security, Arizona Facility Commander. Capabilities assessment, extreme threat if operational. Priority target, eliminate immediately if he engages. They knew about me, James said quietly. Knew my background despite the classified service record. Knew I represented the primary threat to their mission. Which means someone with access to CIA legacy files sold your information. Someone inside the intelligence community is working with foreign contractors. This goes deeper than corporate assassination. James thought about that, thought about the implications, thought about 30 years of classified operations that were supposed to stay buried forever. I can't hide anymore. My cover as a simple compound commander is gone. Anyone who does proper research will find my capabilities. Yes, Grant agreed, which is why I need to make you an offer. They walked to Grant's temporary command post, away from the chaos of casualty treatment and security lockdown, away from operators who were still processing what they'd witnessed. Sentinel Security is expanding our executive protection division, high-risk principles, combat environments, the kind of work that requires exceptional capabilities and tactical leadership. I want you to run it. James started to object, but Grant continued. The position requires operational expertise, the ability to make life and death decisions under extreme pressure, the experience to handle situations exactly like today. Salary is $400,000 per year. You'd be based here but travel extensively. You'd have authority to select your own team, establish training protocols, develop tactical standards. Grant paused. Let that offer settle, or you can remain as compound commander. I won't force you into operational work if you genuinely want to avoid it. But James, today proves something important. When the situation demands it, you are willing and able to step back into combat operations. The question isn't whether you're capable, it's whether you're ready to accept that capability as part of who you are instead of something to hide. James looked around the compound, at faces that had become familiar over 4 years of working alongside these people. Daniel Sullivan, who'd trusted his assessment during the crisis and given him covering fire. Sarah Knox, who'd provided thermal imaging support. Nathan Cross, who'd watched him work and recognized excellence. Tom Sullivan, who'd spent 31 years blaming him for Marcus's death, but who'd seen something today that changed his understanding. All of them professionals who understood what he'd done and respected him for it. I need time to think about it, James said finally. This has been the longest morning of my life, and I'm not ready to make career decisions while I'm still processing everything that happened. Fair enough. Take 48 hours, rest, decompress, talk to whoever you need to talk to, then we'll discuss your future. Grant prepared to leave, but turned back at the helicopter. James, what you did today saved lives, not just Victoria Chen's life, though that alone would justify everything. You saved Daniel, Sarah, Nathan, everyone who would have died if those snipers had continued their work. That matters. That's worth doing even if it comes with psychological costs. After Grant departed, James returned to his quarters. The afternoon sun made the small space feel like an oven, but he barely noticed the heat. He sat at his desk, staring at Emily's letter, still unopened after 3 weeks. His hands were steady as he picked up the envelope, broke the seal, unfolded the pages inside. Emily's handwriting, precise, controlled, like everything else about his daughter. Dad, I know you won't read this immediately, you never do, but I'm writing anyway because Lucas asked about you again. He's 13 now, starting to understand that having a grandfather who never visits means something, means choices were made, priorities established. He asked me yesterday if you didn't love us. I didn't know how to answer that. James closed his eyes, felt something sharp in his chest that had nothing to do with physical injury. I told him you loved your country more than you loved us, that you gave everything to protecting people you'd never meet. That sacrifice meant something even if it cost us a father. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if you made the right choices, but I know Lucas deserves to know his grandfather before it's too late. The letter continued for 2 more pages. Details about Lucas's life, his interests, his questions, his desire to meet the man his mother mentioned with that complicated mixture of pride and sadness. It ended with a simple request. Call me, please, before more years pass, before Lucas stops asking, before we lose whatever chance we have left to be a family. James folded the letter carefully, set it back on his desk, picked up his phone, stared at it for a long moment. Then he made a call he should have made years ago. Emily answered on the 3rd ring. Her voice was cautious, uncertain. Dad? Emily, I got your letter. Silence for several seconds. Then her voice came back different, softer. It took you 3 weeks to open it. I know, I'm sorry. I don't know how to explain what I've been. Hiding, Emily said gently. You've been hiding from us because you don't know how to be a father after spending 40 years being a soldier. James had no response to that, because it was true. I want to meet Lucas, he said finally, if you'll allow it, if he still wants to meet me. He does. He asks about you constantly. When are you coming to visit? Why don't you call? Whether you're proud of him. I'm proud of him. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of the life you built without me. Don't do that, Emily interrupted. Don't make this about pride or respect or any of that military honor language. Just be honest. Are you willing to try being his grandfather? Are you willing to be in his life, even though it's messy and complicated and requires you to be vulnerable? James thought about Marcus Sullivan dying in Mogadishu, thought about 31 years of guilt and isolation, thought about this morning's combat and the realization that he was still the operator he'd always been, thought about whether an operator could learn to be human. I'll try, he said. I don't know if I'll be good at it, but I'll try. That's all I'm asking. They talked for 20 minutes, making plans, setting dates, beginning the awkward process of rebuilding a relationship that had never quite existed in the first place. When James hung up, he felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Hope. The following morning brought federal investigators, FBI, military intelligence, corporate security from TechCore Industries. Everyone wanting detailed accounts of the attack, everyone wanting to understand how their protection had failed and what improvements could prevent future attempts. James spent 6 hours in interviews, describing the engagement, explaining his tactical decisions, providing information about the Apex Strategic Solutions contractors. Angela Torres, Victoria Chen's security director, was particularly interested in his background. Commander Holden, your service record is extensively classified, but what I can access suggests you have capabilities far beyond standard security contractor qualifications. Robert Grant recommended this facility specifically because of your presence. Was that coincidence? You'd have to ask Grant about his operational planning. I'm asking you, were you placed here as insurance, as a contingency in case Victoria's evaluation was compromised? James met her eyes, saw intelligence and determination, the kind of security professional who wouldn't accept deflection. I was placed here because Grant knows my capabilities. Whether that was specifically for Victoria's protection or general security enhancement, I couldn't say. But yes, he knew what I could do if the situation required it. Angela made notes. Your shooting yesterday was analyzed by 3 different military training commands. The consensus is that precision at those ranges under combat stress represents world-class sniper capabilities, the kind developed over decades of operational experience, not something you learn protecting corporate facilities. I had previous training. CIA Special Activities Division, Ground Branch. I did my research after yesterday, or at least I did as much research as someone without top secret clearance can do. Your file has more black ink than actual text. But what's clear is you were one of the agency's premier direct action specialists for 3 decades. James said nothing. Sometimes silence was the best response. Victoria wants to hire you personally, not Sentinel, you specifically. She's offering $800,000 per year to run her global security apparatus. Full authority, unlimited budget, your own team. I'm not interested in personal contracts. She expected you'd say that, so she made an alternative offer. She signs the $600 million contract with Sentinel. But only if you are running the operational side. She trusts the company because she trusts you. That's manipulation. That's business. Victoria Chen didn't build a $12 billion company by accepting second best. She wants the operator who saved her life running her protection. It's not manipulation, it's good judgment. That evening, James found Tom Sullivan in the compound's operations center. Marcus's brother was reviewing security footage from the attack, watching the engagement from multiple camera angles. I've been studying your work, Tom said without looking up, tracking your shot sequence, analyzing your target priority selection, understanding your tactical reasoning. He finally turned to face James. You eliminated them in perfect order, not chronologically, not by range. You prioritized based on threat assessment, took out their best shooters first, the ones with professional positioning and quality equipment, left the less experienced operators for later when you'd have more time. That's standard counter-sniper doctrine. No, that's exceptional tactical judgment under extreme pressure. Most operators would have engaged targets sequentially. You engage them strategically. That's the difference between good and great. Tom was quiet for a moment, then spoke again. Voice different now. I spent 31 years hating you for Marcus's death, blaming you for choosing mission over man, for taking that shot instead of protecting my brother. But I've been thinking about it, really thinking, and I realized Marcus trained you to make that choice. He believed mission first was the only way to survive in this business. He'd have done the same thing if positions were reversed. That doesn't make it right. No, but it makes it understandable. You were following the doctrine Marcus taught you. You weren't abandoning him, you were honoring his training. Tom extended his hand. I'm sorry for blaming you. I'm sorry for carrying that hatred for 3 decades. Marcus would be ashamed of me for that. He'd want me to respect the operator you became, even if he died helping you become it. James took Tom's hand, felt 31 years of weight lifting slightly. I'm sorry I couldn't save him. I'm sorry I chose the mission. I'm sorry you lost your brother because of my decision. We both lost him, but maybe we can stop letting his death define us. The next morning, James called Robert Grant. I'll take the position, Tactical Operations Director for Executive Protection, but I have conditions. Name them? Nathan Cross on my team, once he recovers, Daniel Sullivan as Primary Medical Officer, Sarah Knox for Close Protection Specialist. I recruit the rest personally. Agreed. Training protocols emphasize moral judgment alongside tactical proficiency. We don't just teach people to fight, we teach them to think. Agreed. I have final authority on contract acceptance. If I assess a principle or situation as ethically compromised, I can decline the mission, no questions, no pressure. That last one is problematic. We're a business. We can't turn down lucrative contracts based on one person's moral assessment. Then find someone else to run your operations, because I won't be hired muscle anymore. I'll be an operator with a conscience. Take it or leave it. Grant was quiet for several seconds. Marcus Sullivan would be proud of you. He spent 20 years trying to teach operators to think morally while acting lethally. You finally learned the lesson. It only took his death and 31 years of guilt. Some lessons cost more than others. When can you start? I need 2 weeks. I'm flying to Denver, meeting my grandson, trying to remember how to be human before I become operational again. Take 3 weeks, clear your head, reconnect with family. The job will be here when you're ready. 2 days later, James stood at Denver International Airport, waiting at baggage claim, nervous in a way he'd never been facing enemy fire. He saw Emily first, 40 years old, looking so much like her mother it hurt. She waved, started walking toward him. Beside her walked a boy, 13 years old, tall for his age, brown hair, uncertain expression. Lucas, his grandson. The boy he'd never met because James Holden had spent 40 years choosing country over family, mission over men, duty over love. Emily reached him first, hugged him awkwardly. Too many years of distance to make it natural. Then she stepped back. Let Lucas come forward. The boy extended his hand, formal, uncertain. Hi, I'm Lucas. You're my grandfather. James took his hand, felt something crack inside his chest. Some wall he'd built decades ago starting to crumble. I'm James. I'm sorry it took me 13 years to meet you. Mom says you were protecting people, that you couldn't visit because of your job. That's partially true, but mostly I was afraid. Afraid I wouldn't know how to be a grandfather. Afraid I'd fail at it like I failed at being a father. Lucas looked at him, studied him. 13-year-old wisdom that saw through deflection. Are you still afraid? Terrified. Good. Mom says being scared means you care. That only people who don't care are never afraid. James looked at Emily, saw her smile. Your mother is very wise. She gets it from you, Lucas said. Even though you were never there, she learned from what you taught her about courage, about doing hard things, about protecting people who can't protect themselves. They walked to Emily's car, making awkward conversation, beginning the complicated process of building relationship from nothing. That night at Emily's house, Lucas asked the question James had been dreading. Grandpa, why did you choose your job over us? James considered lying, considered deflecting, considered all the ways he could avoid the truth. Instead, he told it straight. Because I was a coward. Because it was easier to fight enemies I could kill than face family who needed me to be vulnerable. Because I knew how to be an operator, but I didn't know how to be human. And by the time I realized my mistake, so many years had passed, I didn't know how to fix it. Lucas thought about that. Are you going to fix it now? I'm going to try. I don't know if I can, but I'm going to try. That's all anyone can do. James spent 3 weeks in Denver learning about Lucas's life, his interests, his dreams, his fears, learning how to be present instead of absent, how to listen instead of command, how to be grandfather instead of operator. It wasn't easy. 40 years of training didn't evaporate in 3 weeks, but it was a start. On his last night, Lucas asked to see photos from James's career. Emily had warned against it, but James pulled out his phone, showed him pictures that weren't classified. You killed people, didn't you? Lucas asked, not accusing, just seeking truth. Yes. How many? James considered lying, considered protecting the boy from reality, but he'd promised honesty. 312 confirmed, probably more that were never confirmed. Lucas was quiet, processing that number. Do you regret it? Every single day. But I don't regret protecting people. I regret the cost of that protection. To them, to me, to our family. Mom says you're a hero. I'm not. Heroes make sacrifices for people they love. I sacrificed the people I loved for strangers. That's not heroism. That's cowardice with a flag wrapped around it. But you're trying to do better now. I'm trying to do better now. Lucas hugged him. 13 years old and already wiser than James had been at 60. I'm glad you're my grandpa, even if you took a long time to show up. 3 weeks after the attack, James returned to Arizona, ready to begin his new role, ready to train the next generation, ready to teach operators to think morally while acting lethally, ready to honor Marcus Sullivan's memory by becoming the teacher Marcus had tried to make him 31 years ago. The compound had been repaired, bullet impacts patched, blood cleaned, new security protocols implemented. The physical damage was gone. But everyone who'd been there that morning remembered, would always remember, the day their quiet compound commander became something else, something deadly and precise and utterly professional. Nathan Cross was waiting when James arrived, still recovering but mobile, determined to begin training. The doctors had been wrong, 3 months, not 6. Cracked ribs healed, lung reinflated, bruising faded, youth and determination proving stronger than medical projections. Teach me everything, Nathan said. Everything you know. I want to be the operator you are. James looked at the young man, saw himself at 28, saw potential that could be shaped. I'll teach you, but understand something first. Being a great operator isn't about shooting. It's about judgment, about knowing when to shoot and when not to, about choosing men over mission when it matters, about being human while being lethal. That sounds impossible. It is, but we're going to try anyway, because that's what Marcus Sullivan taught me. And it only took his death in 31 years for me to learn it. They walked to the training range, beginning the work, beginning the teaching, beginning the process of creating operators who could be lethal with conscience. James Holden was 62 years old, had 312 confirmed kills to his name, had spent 40 years being the thing his country needed him to be. Now he'd spend however many years remain teaching others to be better than he'd been. It wasn't redemption. Redemption wasn't possible for men like him, but it was purpose. And sometimes purpose was enough. The call came at 3:47 in the morning, 6 months after James became Tactical Operations Director. He was already awake. Dreams still woke him at odd hours, but the nightmares had changed. Not just Marcus Sullivan dying in Mogadishu anymore. Now they included Lucas asking how many people his grandfather had killed. Emily's face when she realized how much of his life had been spent taking lives instead of building them. 312 confirmed eliminations. The number that defined 40 years of service. James answered on the second ring. Holden, it's Grant. We have a situation. How fast can you get to Phoenix? James was already moving, pulling on clothes, checking his go bag. 40 years of emergency deployments had taught him to always be ready. 90 minutes if I push it. What's the situation? Victoria Chen's been kidnapped, taken from her hotel in Phoenix 3 hours ago. Professional snatch operation. No witnesses, no security footage. Her protection detail was drugged. They just woke up. James felt ice settle into his chest, the feeling he got when operations went catastrophic. Tom Sullivan? Alive. Barely. He fought back when they came through the door. Took 3 rounds, 2 caught his body armor square in the chest. 3rd grazed his shoulder and nicked an artery. He's in surgery now, but doctors say he'll make it. Before he went under, he said to tell you one name. Dmitri. That name hit James like a physical blow. Dmitri Volkov. A name he hadn't heard in 36 years. A ghost from Nicaragua in 1988. From Operation Phantom Serpent. From the mission that officially never happened and that James had tried to forget for nearly 4 decades. Dimitri's dead. We confirmed it in '88. Apparently not. Tom identified him positively. Said Dmitri told him this was personal. That he'd been waiting 36 years for payback. James's mind was racing, calculating, understanding implications that spread back decades. The attack on my compound 6 months ago. The sniper team, that was Dmitri too. We think so. The Apex Strategic Solutions contractors were Russian-backed. Dmitri founded Apex, has run it for 15 years. He orchestrated the entire operation, not just corporate assassination. He was targeting you specifically. Why wait 36 years? Why now? I asked the same question. Our intelligence suggests he's been watching you for decades. Waiting. He wanted you to build something worth losing first. Wanted you to taste happiness before he took it away. 6 months ago, you reconnected with your daughter, met your grandson, found purpose again. That's when he struck the compound. When that failed, he waited for you to grow even more attached to your new life. Now he's ready for the final move. James grabbed his keys, headed for his truck. The Arizona desert at night was cold, temperature dropping to the 40s, his breath visible in the darkness. What does he want? You. He'll trade Victoria for you, 1-to-1 exchange. He sends location. You show up alone, no backup, no arms. He releases Victoria and takes you instead. It's a trap, obviously, but Victoria's life is on the line. Her company is putting pressure on Sentinel, on me, on you. They want their CEO back and they don't care about the count. James started the truck, began the drive toward Phoenix. Highway empty at this hour. Just him and the darkness and 40 years of choices catching up. Where's the exchange? No location yet. Dmitri said he'd contact you directly. Said he has your personal number. James, how does a Russian PMC operator have your personal cell? Because Dmitri Volkov isn't just some contractor. He's former Spetsnaz, Alpha Group. He was embedded with my team in Nicaragua in 1988. We worked together for 6 months, became brothers, until the operation went sideways and I left him behind. Grant was quiet for several seconds. You never mentioned working with Russian operators. It was classified above your clearance level. Still is. Operation Phantom Serpent was joint CIA KGB Black Op, back when we were both fighting communist insurgents in Central America. before the Soviet Union collapsed and we remembered we were enemies. What happened in Nicaragua? We recovered a Soviet nuclear trigger that had been stolen by Contras. Mission was to return it to Moscow, prevent an international incident. But when the extraction went sideways, I had to choose. Save my team or save Dmitry. I chose my team. You left him behind. I left him to die, except apparently he didn't die. He survived. Went rogue. Spent 36 years building a private military empire. And now he wants payback. James's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered on speaker. Holden? The voice that came through was older, rougher, accented, but unmistakable even after 3.5 decades. Hello, James. It has been a long time. Dmitry Volkov, the man James had left bleeding in a Nicaraguan jungle in 1908. The man who should have died from his wounds. The man who'd apparently survived through sheer hatred and determination. Dmitry, I thought you were dead. You wished I was dead. Not the same thing. I survived. Barely. Took me 3 years to recover from what your bullets in the jungle did to my body. Another 5 to build my network. 15 more to become powerful enough to make you pay for abandoning me. I didn't abandon you. I made a tactical decision under impossible circumstances. You left me bleeding while you escaped with your team. You chose Americans over a brother. You broke the oath we made, that we would protect each other no matter what flag we served. James remembered that oath, remembered making it after 3 months of working together, after Dmitry had saved his life twice in firefights with Contra forces, after James had saved Dmitry's life once when an ambush went bad. They'd been brothers, closer than blood, until circumstances forced a choice. I'm sorry, if I could go back and change it, I would. But you cannot go back, so you will come forward, to me, alone, unarmed. You will trade yourself for Victoria Chen, and then you and I will have a conversation about loyalty and betrayal and the price of leaving brothers behind. How do I know you'll release her? You do not, but you know I will kill her if you refuse. She means nothing to me. She is only leverage. The person I want is you. Where? Dmitry gave coordinates. An address in the desert outside Phoenix, abandoned industrial facility, 40 miles from the city, the kind of location perfect for what he was planning. Come alone. I have people watching every approach. If I see backup, if I detect any tactical support, Victoria Chen dies immediately. Then I disappear and you spend the rest of your life knowing you killed her through your caution. When? Dawn. You have 3 hours. I suggest you do not waste them. The line went dead. James immediately called Grant back. I'm going in. James, it's suicide. He'll kill you both. Maybe, but I don't have a choice. Victoria's life is my responsibility. I run her protection operations. I designed her security protocols. If she dies because Dmitry wanted to hurt me, that's on me. Let me send a team. We'll set up overwatch, sniper support, extraction capability on standby. No, Dmitry will be watching. He's been planning this for 36 years. He'll have counter-surveillance, anti-sniper measures, probably has the entire facility rigged with sensors and cameras. If he detects backup, Victoria dies. So you're just going to walk into his trap? James thought about that. Thought about Marcus Sullivan dying because James chose mission over man. Thought about 40 years of making impossible choices. Thought about whether he was tired of choosing. Yes, I'm walking into his trap, but I'm not going unprepared. He made 3 more calls. First to Nathan Cross. 3 months into recovery, the young operator had defied medical projections and was already cleared for light duty. Determination and youth healing, what doctors said would take 6 months. Nathan, I need you to do something off the books, something that violates every protocol and could end your career. Nathan's voice was alert despite the early hour. 6 months of training under James had taught him to be ready always. What do you need, boss? I need you to track my phone, follow at extreme distance, stay completely hidden. Don't engage unless you hear me transmit the code word Mogadishu. If you hear that word, it means I'm dead or about to be. You hit the facility with everything you have and extract Victoria Chen by any means necessary. James, that sounds like you're planning not to come back. I'm planning for contingencies. Can you do it? I can do it, but I don't like it. Nobody said you had to like it. Just be there. Second call to Daniel Sullivan, Marcus's son, 36 years old now and the best combat medic James had ever trained. Daniel, I need you on standby with Nathan. Full trauma kit. Whatever happens at dawn, someone's going to need medical attention. Sir, what's happening? The man who organized the attack on our compound 6 months ago. He's back. He has Victoria Chen. I'm going to get her. Does Tom know? Tom's in surgery. He'll live, but he's out of this fight. Daniel, I need you to understand something. If I don't come back, tell your uncle I'm sorry. Tell him I finally learned the lesson his brother tried to teach me, that people matter more than missions. Silence on the line. Then Daniel's voice, steady despite the emotion. My father died because you chose the mission. Don't you dare die the same way. Choose people this time, James. That's what he would have wanted. I'm trying. Third call to Emily. She answered, sleepy and confused. Dad, it's almost 4 in the morning. What's wrong? I need you to know something, in case I don't get to say it later. I love you. I love Lucas. I'm sorry I wasted 40 years being absent. These last 6 months knowing him have been the best of my life. Emily's voice changed, alert now, worried. What's happening? Are you in danger? I'm fixing something I broke a long time ago. But I need you to know that if something happens to me, I died trying to be the man you deserved all along. Dad, don't talk like that. Whatever you're doing, don't do it. Come to Denver. Be with us. Choose family for once. I am choosing family. Victoria Chen has a daughter and 2 grandchildren. If I don't go, she never sees them again. I can't live with that. But you can live with Lucas never seeing his grandfather again? James had no answer for that, because Emily was right. He was making the same choice he'd always made. Strangers over family, mission over men. Except this time it felt different. This time it felt like the right choice for the right reasons. Someone else's grandchildren mattered too. Tell Lucas I'm proud of him. Tell him his grandfather learned too late that being an operator wasn't enough. That you have to be human too. Tell him I finally figured it out. Tell him yourself. Come back alive. I'll try. He hung up before Emily could argue further. The drive to the coordinates took 90 minutes. James used the time to prepare mentally, to run through scenarios, to accept what was probably coming. Dmitry Volkov wasn't interested in trading hostages. He was interested in revenge. 36 years of planning meant 36 years of hatred. Meant a man who'd spent decades preparing for this moment. James wasn't walking into a negotiation. He was walking into an execution. But maybe that was fair. Maybe after 40 years and 312 kills, execution was what he deserved. The facility appeared as dawn broke over the desert. Abandoned manufacturing plant. Concrete buildings surrounded by chain-link fence. Guard towers unmanned. Equipment rusted. The kind of place that had been dying for 20 years and finally gave up. Perfect location for what Dmitry had planned. James parked his truck a quarter-mile out. Left his phone on the seat. Nathan would track it here. Would set up Overwatch somewhere in the surrounding desert. Would wait for the code word that might never come. He walked toward the facility unarmed, hands visible, moving slowly, demonstrating compliance. The main gate stood open, recent tracks in the dust, 2 vehicles, maybe 3. Dmitry wasn't alone. James entered the compound, crossed the open yard toward the largest building. His tactical mind automatically assessed fields of fire. Cover positions, angles of attack. 40 years of training didn't shut off just because he'd agreed to be a prisoner. The building's door opened before he reached it. Dmitry Volkov stepped out, 64 years old now. Same age as James would be in 2 years. Former Spetsnaz Alpha Group, the elite of Russian special operations. A man who'd survived wounds that should have killed him. Who'd spent 36 years building a private military empire. Who'd waited patiently for revenge. He looked like what he was. An old warrior who'd been through hell and emerged harder. Scarred face, gray hair cropped short, eyes that held nothing but cold calculation. James, you came. I was not certain you would. You have Victoria Chen. Where is she? Inside. Unharmed. I am many things, but I do not make war on innocent women. She has done nothing to me. You, however, have done a great deal. Dmitry gestured toward the building. 4 armed men emerged. Professional contractors. Russian or Eastern European based on their equipment and bearing. Apex Strategic Solutions personnel. Dmitry's people. Your sidearm, James. I know you carried one despite my instructions. You are too professional not to. James reached behind his back, pulled the Glock 19 he'd hidden there, dropped it on the ground. Ankle holster, boot knife, anything else I should know about? James removed both, placed them with the Glock. Dmitry nodded to his men. They moved forward, searched James thoroughly, found nothing else because there was nothing else to find. Good. Now we can talk as men instead of operators. They entered the building. Large open space, former manufacturing floor, equipment long since removed, just concrete and steel beams and dust. Victoria Chen sat in a chair in the center of the space, hands zip-tied behind her, duct tape over her mouth, but alive, uninjured. Her eyes went wide when she saw James. As promised, she is unharmed. Now you will take her place. James walked to Victoria, pulled the tape from her mouth as gently as possible, cut the zip ties with a knife one of Dimitri's men handed him. Commander Holden, Tom tried to stop them. He fought so hard. There were too many. I know. Tom's going to be fine. His armor caught the worst of it and the shoulder wound is being treated. You're going to be fine too. Just walk out of here and don't look back. What about you? I made a deal. Go. Victoria stood on shaky legs. One of Dimitri's men escorted her to the door. To freedom, to her daughter and grandchildren, and the life she'd built over 58 years. James watched her go, felt oddly at peace. He'd saved someone. After 312 kills, he'd finally saved someone that mattered in a way that didn't require taking another life. Dimitri's men grabbed James, zip-tied his hands behind him. Roughly, professionally, no chance of escape. Then Dimitri dismissed his men, sent them outside to secure the perimeter, until it was just the two of them. Two old warriors in an abandoned building, finally settling accounts that were 36 years overdue. Do you remember Nicaragua, James? Do you remember Operation Phantom Serpent? Every day. Tell me what you remember. James saw no point in lying. Not now, not here. We were supposed to recover a Soviet nuclear trigger that had been stolen by Contras. Joint CIA-KGB operation. You and I led the team. 6 months of working together. We became brothers. We did. I trusted you more than any man I have ever known. I would have died for you. Very nearly did. The extraction went bad. We were ambushed at the border. You were hit, bleeding badly. I had to choose between evacuating my team or staying to protect you while we called for support. And you chose your team. I chose the trigger. We couldn't let it fall into Contra hands. The mission was bigger than any individual life, including yours, including mine. Dimitri nodded slowly, as if James had confirmed something he'd suspected. That is what I thought. You chose mission over man, just as you chose mission over Marcus Sullivan 5 years later in Mogadishu. Just as you have chosen mission over family for 40 years. Do you see the pattern, James? I see it. You are an instrument, nothing more. You make the calculation, weigh the options, choose the outcome that serves the mission. The people who love you are merely acceptable losses in service of something larger. James had no defense because Dimitri was right. But I wonder something. I wonder if you are still that instrument, or if 40 years have changed you. If losing Marcus Sullivan taught you anything. If having a grandson you finally met taught you what you sacrificed. What do you want from me, Dimitri? I want to know if you have any humanity left. If you are capable of choosing man over mission. Dimitri pulled out a tablet, opened it, showed James the screen. Video feed, live. From a house James recognized. Emily's house in Denver. The camera showed the living room. Emily and Lucas, both zip-tied to chairs, both terrified. A masked man standing behind them, armed, professional, another Apex contractor. James's blood went cold. You have a choice, James, the same choice you gave me 36 years ago. Mission or family. Here is how it works. Dimitri's voice was calm, almost gentle. The voice of a man who'd rehearsed this moment for decades. Option 1, I kill you now, quickly, painlessly. You die and your family lives. The man in Denver receives a signal and walks away. Emily and Lucas never see him again. Or, option 2, you fight back. You try to escape. You transmit your code word to the young operator you have hidden in the desert. He attacks. My men engage. You possibly escape in the chaos. But the moment I die or my men are engaged, the man in Denver kills your daughter and grandson. He has orders. He will follow them. James stared at the screen, at Emily's terrified face, at Lucas crying, at his family held hostage because of choices he'd made 40 years ago. You cannot save both, James. You cannot complete the mission and protect the people you love. You must choose, as you made me choose, as you made Marcus Sullivan choose when you took the shot instead of protecting him. Now you will know what it feels like. James looked at Dimitri, saw 36 years of hatred, saw a man who'd been left bleeding and had survived purely through rage, Saw someone who'd spent decades planning this exact revenge. If I surrender, if I let you kill me, you release Emily and Lucas immediately? Immediately, you have my word. The word of a Spetsnaz officer, which still means something even if CIA promises mean nothing. How do I know you'll keep your word? You do not. But you know I will kill them if you resist. So you must choose to trust me. Must choose to believe that I am a man of honor, even though you are not. James's mind was racing, looking for angles, for solutions, for the tactical answer that would save everyone. But there was no tactical answer. Dmitri had planned too well, had created a perfect dilemma, no way to save both himself and his family. The choice Marcus Sullivan had faced in Mogadishu, the choice Dmitri had faced in Nicaragua, the choice that James had forced others to make for 40 years. Now it was his turn. He thought about Lucas's question 6 months ago. How many people had his grandfather killed? 312 confirmed. He thought about Emily's plea just hours ago. Come back alive. Choose family for once. He thought about Marcus Sullivan's last words in Mogadishu. You did the right thing, James. Mission first. Always. And James realized Marcus had been wrong. Mission first wasn't always right. Sometimes mission first was just cowardice dressed up as duty, an excuse to avoid the harder choice, the more painful choice, the choice that required vulnerability instead of violence. If I surrender, if I let you execute me, you let my family go immediately, before you kill me. I watched them released on that video feed. Then you can do whatever you want. Dmitri studied him, looking for deception, for tactical calculation, for the operator running angles. He saw something different, saw surrender, saw acceptance, saw a man choosing family over mission for the first time in 40 years. Agreed, I will release them first. You will see it happen. Then we settle our debt. Dmitri made a call, spoke in Russian. James understood enough to know he was ordering Emily and Lucas released. Heard the confirmation, heard the man in Denver acknowledge. On the tablet screen, James watched the contractor cut their zip ties, watched him step back, watched him walk out the front door without looking back. Emily grabbed Lucas, held him, both of them crying but alive, safe. James felt something break inside him. Some wall he'd been carrying for decades, lifting, floating away. He'd chosen family. For once in 40 years, he'd chosen the people he loved over the mission. Now, Dmitri said, pulling out a pistol, you are finished. Wait! The voice came from the doorway. Tom Sullivan stood there, bandaged heavily around his shoulder and chest, pale from blood loss, barely standing, hospital gown visible under a tactical jacket someone had thrown over him. But alive, awake, armed with a pistol in his good hand. Behind him, Daniel Sullivan, Marcus's son, carrying a medical kit in one hand and a rifle in the other. And behind them, Nathan Cross, Sarah Knox, 3 other operators James had trained over the past 6 months. His team, his family, coming for him. Uncle Tom, you should be in surgery recovery. Daniel's voice mixed concern with professional focus. Walked out, borrowed a car, surgery can wait. James came for Victoria, we come for James. That's how brothers work. Dimitri's men rushed in from outside, arms raised, ready to fire. But Tom had his pistol aimed at Dimitri's head. Classic standoff. Tell your men to stand down, Tom said, or I put a round through your skull before they can pull their triggers. Dmitri smiled. Actually smiled, something shifting in his expression. So James Holden does have brothers, after all. Men who will risk their lives for him. How unexpected, how interesting. I'm not asking twice. You will not need to ask again, I am satisfied. Dmitri lowered his pistol, signaled his men to stand down. The tension held for a moment, then slowly released as everyone followed his lead. James stared at Dmitri, confused. I don't understand. You had me. You were going to kill me. Why stop now? Because killing you was never really the point. I wanted to know if you had changed. I wanted to know if James Holden had learned to value people over missions. Wanted to know if you had become human after 40 years of being an instrument. Dmitri holstered his weapon completely. You chose your family over your life, James. You surrendered. You were willing to die so Emily and Lucas could live. That is the answer I sought. I left you bleeding in Nicaragua. You survived through hate, spent 36 years planning revenge. You earned that revenge. Why let me go now? Because revenge is hollow. I learned that over 36 years of plotting. Killing you would not heal my wounds, would not undo your betrayal, would only create more suffering, more widows, more orphans, More old men who die alone regretting the choices they made. Dmitri stepped forward. His men tensed, but he waved them off. I am 64 years old, James. Same as you will be soon. How many more years do we have? 5? 10? 20 if we are fortunate? I will not spend them consumed by hatred for a choice you made under impossible circumstances. We were both soldiers, both made terrible decisions, both lost brothers to the work. That is the price of what we were. He extended his hand. I forgive you for Nicaragua. Now you must forgive yourself. James stared at that extended hand, at the man he'd left bleeding, at the ghost who'd haunted him for 36 years. He took Dimitri's hand. I'm sorry I left you behind. I'm sorry you suffered. I'm sorry I valued mission over man. We all did. That was how we survived. But perhaps it is time to stop surviving and start living. Dimitri released James's zip ties, gestured to his men to stand down completely. Go. Be with your family. Teach your operators to be better than we were. Maybe the next generation will not make our mistakes. Tom Sullivan drove James back toward Phoenix, Daniel in the back seat monitoring Tom's vitals. Both Sullivan men refusing to acknowledge they should be in a hospital instead of a vehicle. They rode in silence for the first 30 miles, processing what had just happened. Finally, Tom spoke. Marcus would have been proud. You chose right this time. I almost didn't. I almost sent Nathan into attack. Almost chose mission over family again. Almost doesn't matter. What matters is what you actually did. You surrendered. You chose to die so Emily and Lucas could live. That's what fathers do. That's what grandfathers do. I'm not a hero, Tom. Yes, you are. You just spent 40 years learning how to be one. At the hospital, Tom was readmitted. His shoulder wound needed proper surgical attention. He'd pulled stitches escaping from recovery. Nearly bled out in the parking lot before Daniel got him into the car. As they wheeled him toward the OR, Tom grabbed James's hand. Tell my nephew I'm proud of him. Tell Daniel that his father would be proud too. Tell him the Sullivan men know how to choose right when it matters. I'll tell him. Daniel stood beside James as Tom disappeared through the surgical doors. 36 years old, Marcus Sullivan's son, named after a father he'd never really known. He's going to be fine, James said. Your uncle's too stubborn to die. Runs in the family. Daniel paused. My father died because you chose mission over man. But today you chose differently. That means something, James. It means you learned what he was trying to teach you. It took me 31 years and almost losing everything I love. Some lessons take longer than others. What matters is you learned it. James's phone rang. Emily. Dad? They let us go. The man just cut us loose and walked away. What happened? I made a deal. Are you and Lucas safe? We're home, locked inside. Lucas is shaken, but he's okay. Dad, who were those men? What have you gotten us into? Something I should have resolved 36 years ago. I'm sorry. I'm sorry my past reached out and touched you. That should never have happened. Are you safe? I am. The situation is resolved. Emily, I need to tell you something. When I thought they were going to kill you and Lucas, when I thought I had to choose between saving you or saving myself, I chose you. For the first time in my life, I chose family over mission. That probably doesn't mean much after 40 years of choosing wrong. But I wanted you to know. Emily was crying. He could hear it in her voice. It means everything. It means you're finally the father I always needed you to be. I'm flying to Denver tomorrow. I need to see you and Lucas. Need to make sure you're really okay. Need to be there instead of here for once. We'll be waiting. 2 weeks later, James stood in Arlington National Cemetery. Gray morning, cold wind, the kind of weather that made old bones ache. But he wasn't there because of pain. He was there because of peace. Marcus Sullivan's grave was in Section 60, where they buried recent casualties. Special operations personnel who died in missions that officially never happened. Heroes whose names were carved in stone, but whose actions remained classified. James had been to this grave once before, in 1990 at Marcus's funeral, when Tom Sullivan had looked at him with eyes full of blame, and James had accepted that blame as truth. Now he was back, 31 years later, not to accept blame but to make peace. Tom Sullivan stood beside him, arm in a sling but alive, retired from executive protection now, too old for the work after 3 bullets in one night, planning to teach young operators instead. Following James's path, Daniel Sullivan stood on James's other side, 36 years old, his father's age when he died, lead medical officer for Sentinel's Tactical Operations Division, carrying on the Sullivan legacy of saving lives. Dad, Daniel said quietly, I never knew you. You died when I was 3. But James has told me stories about who you were, what you believed, how you trained him to be an operator who thought instead of just followed orders. He paused, collecting himself. He says you would have made the same choice he did, that you taught him mission first because that's how warriors survive. But he also says you were wrong, that people have to come first, that missions matter less than humanity. I think you would agree with him now. I think you'd be proud he finally learned that lesson. Tom placed his good hand on the gravestone, traced his brother's name with his fingers. Marcus, I blamed James for 31 years. Thought he killed you through cowardice. But I was wrong. He made an impossible choice under terrible circumstances. A choice you trained him to make. The blame isn't his. It's the work we chose. The life that demanded we sacrifice everything, including each other. Tom turned to James. I forgave you 6 months ago. But standing here, I want to say it again with Marcus as witness. You didn't kill my brother. The mission killed him. The world we operated in killed him. And you've spent 31 years punishing yourself enough for all of us. It's time to stop. James knelt beside the grave, placed his hand on the cold stone. Marcus, I've spent 31 years carrying your death, believing I killed you through bad judgment. Maybe I did. Maybe I made the wrong choice, but I'm done letting that choice define me. You taught me to be an operator. Thank you. Now I'm teaching myself to be human. I hope wherever you are, you understand. He stood, looked at Tom and Daniel, at the Sullivan family that had lost so much because of the work James Holden had done. Thank you for forgiving me the chance to be more than my mistakes. They walked from the cemetery together, 3 men connected by loss and service, and the long, difficult road to forgiveness. The next morning, James submitted his resignation to Robert Grant. I'm done, Robert, for real this time. Grant didn't seem surprised. They were sitting in his office in Phoenix, morning light coming through windows, coffee getting cold on the desk between them. I expected this after what happened, but I have to ask why. Because I'm 62 years old. Because I have maybe 15 years left if I'm lucky. Because I want to spend those years being Lucas's grandfather, being Emily's father, being the family member I should have been all along. What about the operators you trained? Nathan and Daniel and Sarah. They're ready, better than ready. They don't need an old man teaching them anymore. They need to find their own way. Grant was quiet for a moment. Then he stood, extended his hand. 43 years, James. You've been the best operator I've ever known, the most effective, the most reliable. But what I'm most proud of is that you finally learned to be more than an operator. That's harder than any mission, braver than any combat. James shook his hand, felt decades of history in that grip. Thank you for recruiting me. Thank you for believing in me all these years. Thank you for finally letting me go. 1 month later, James moved to Denver. Not to an apartment nearby, to Emily's house, to the spare room that Lucas had helped prepare, to a place in his family's life that had been empty for 40 years. It wasn't easy. 40 years of training didn't evaporate in weeks. He still woke at odd hours, still assessed threats in grocery stores, still calculated fields of fire when entering restaurants. But every morning, he had breakfast with his grandson. Every evening, he had dinner with his daughter. Every day, he practiced being human instead of being an operator. Lucas had questions, endless questions, about the military, about the CIA, about what his grandfather had done in places that didn't officially exist. James answered honestly. Told him about Nicaragua and Mogadishu and a dozen other places. Told him about choices made and prices paid. Told him about 312 confirmed kills and the weight that number carried. Do you regret it? Lucas asked one evening. They were sitting on the back porch, Denver's sunset painting the sky orange and pink. I regret to the people I killed, to their families, to our family, to myself. But I don't regret protecting people. Don't regret the missions that actually mattered. How do you tell the difference between missions that mattered and ones that didn't? James thought about that. 40 years of service distilled into one question from a 15-year-old boy. The missions that mattered were the ones where I protected people who couldn't protect themselves. The ones that didn't matter were when I was just following orders because someone told me to. Took me a long time to learn the difference. What about the missions where you had to choose? Like with Marcus Sullivan. Those are the ones that haunt you. The ones where there's no right answer, just wrong answers that hurt different people. James paused. Your grandmother asked me once what I wanted my legacy to be. I didn't have an answer then. I do now. What is it? I want to be remembered as the man who finally learned that people matter more than missions, who chose his family over his duty, who figured out that being a killer wasn't enough. You have to be human too. Lucas was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned against his grandfather's shoulder. I think that's a good legacy. I hope so. I'm still working on it. 6 months later, James got a letter. International postage, Russian return address. Inside, a single photograph. Dmitry Volkov, standing in front of a small house, mountains in the background, smiling. On the back, written in careful English, I found peace. I hope you have too. Perhaps some old warriors are allowed to rest. Thank you for teaching me that revenge is hollow. DV. James put the photograph in a frame, set it on his desk next to the picture of Marcus Sullivan. Two ghosts from two different mistakes, both finally at rest. That evening, Lucas asked about the new photograph. Who's that? Someone I heard a long time ago, someone who taught me that forgiveness is stronger than revenge. Are you friends now? James thought about that, about 36 years of hatred that had dissolved in a single moment of grace, about enemies who became teachers, about the strange paths that led old warriors to peace. I don't know if friends is the right word, but we understand each other. Sometimes that's enough. Lucas nodded, 15 years old and already wise in ways James hadn't been at 60. I'm glad you have people who understand you, Grandpa. Everyone needs that. You're right, everyone does. That night, James slept without nightmares for the first time he could remember. No Marcus Sullivan dying in Mogadishu. No Dmitri bleeding in Nicaragua. No ghosts demanding answers. Just peace. The peace of a man who'd finally learned that being a killer wasn't enough. The peace of a man who'd chosen family over mission. The peace of a man who'd forgiven himself and been forgiven in return. James Holden was 62 years old, 312 confirmed kills, 40 years of service, a lifetime of mistakes and choices and prices paid. But none of that defined him anymore. What defined him now was simpler, quieter, more important. He was Lucas's grandfather, Emily's father, a man who'd finally come home. And that was enough. That was more than enough. The end.